On this episode of the Motorsport Recently Show.
That looks like a police car following us. That's interesting. I hope it doesn't turn on its blue light. And then it did.
Unfortunately, that has meant a shocker for the Triple Crown Racing F1 fantasy team.
Your eyes need like 6 screens back and forth so you can see everything that's going on.
I can't help but draw parallels between Williams' resurgence and McLaren's resurgence.
Do not give him a microphone.
Hello everybody, my name is Jack McKenzie, and joining me on the mic as usual is the wonderful Chris Whitfield, and joining us from the Shadow Realm is Caitlin Penny Commentary, and you are listening to episode number 10 of the Motorsport Recently Show. Guys, we've all survived, and Caitlin, you have a car-related story for us.
I do. Well, thank you very much, Jack. So as you guys can see, I'm in a slightly more shadowy realm than I normally am. I am sorry about that. Unfortunately, there's not really much I can do about the lighting here, at least not for now. So I've moved in with my partner recently. It is going very, very well. But it does, of course, mean that I have a car-related story, because not only have I now bought a car, a Nissan Micra, but I have done my first long-distance journey, which went kind of well and kind of badly, depending on how you see it. So first of all, the car. The Nissan Micra, it's very ugly, but so long as it keeps chugging along, that's all I can ask of it, and therefore I have nicknamed it Uggo Chuggo. That is its name now. As for the long distance journey, it was okay. We survived. We got there in the end. Unfortunately, it took a lot longer than expected, because there are a couple of diversions and things. But here we go. Stay with me. I know they say you've got like 30 seconds to catch an audience's attention, but I'm just getting onto the good bit now. We got pulled over. So, yeah. So I was driving along
the Rosers.
Yeah, crikey, it's the Rosers. So I was driving along a little street. It was, probably 11 o'clock at night by this point, because we'd already been held up by the diversion. And I was looking in my mirrors and I'm like, that looks like a police car following us. That's interesting. I hope it doesn't turn on its blue light. Could you imagine? And then it did. And I'm like, oh no. So anyway, I pulled over and they're like, could you step out of the vehicle, please? And I'm like, what have I done? Did I blow a red light? Was I driving poorly? Like, what? Because you got to remember, I've only been driving for like 2 months. So I was really scared that I was going to lose my license. And then they were like, did you know you have a light out, one of the side lights? And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. But thank you for letting me know. So yeah, apparently we had a light out. We have since repaired said light, so it is okay. And they let me go without like fining me or anything like that. But yeah, there were a couple of like other little funny things to do with that story, like how we struggled to get the car started again afterwards, and the police were like, "Is everything okay here?" And also the fact that when they asked us where we were going to, we were actually going in the opposite direction from the desired location because of the diversions. So there were just a load of little weird things like that. But yeah, my first time doing a long journey, and also my first time ever being pulled over by the police. Woohoo!
And if you would like to be on the Motorsport Recently Show next week, please write into Caitlin Penny has now been arrested at gmail.com, and I would like to be, and tell us why you think you'd be a good fit for the show. Am I correct in saying, so it's a Nissan Micra that you've bought? When you did, so a number of years ago, about 6 years ago now, you did a dirt speedway race. Am I correct in saying that car was not the same model of Nissan Micra, but also a Nissan Micra, albeit a slightly older version of it?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. In good memory. I don't think they're related. I don't think I just have an affinity for Nissans now. But I don't know. Maybe I do. But yeah, that was a slightly older model. That was like a kind of really early 2000s model that we did autographs in, and then this is a 2004 plate. So there's that.
Fair enough then. We should get... Yes.
Also, I like the name of it, Uggo Chuggo.
Uggo Chuggo, yeah.
Which leads me to ask the following follow-up question. Didn't he win Macau last year?
Oh, that's Ugo Chukwu. No. No. Uggo Chuggo, because it's ugly, but if it keeps chugging along, then it's fine.
Chris Whitfield, you're looking very green this week. How are you?
Representing Callahan Auto Parts of Sandusky, Ohio. not an actual thing. It's from the film Tommy Boy. I talked a lawnmower to my hair, as one does, as you do.
Anyway, we're of course not here to talk about T-shirts and Nissan Micras, as nice as that would be, because we've got quite a lot of motor racing to talk about this week. And Formula One is back in a big way, and that's what we're going to start off this episode with. And first and foremost, I think we have a strong contender for Father of the Year in Anthony Hamilton, going up to comfort Isaac Hadjar after he spun out on the formation lap at the 2025 Australian Grand Prix. Class act from Hamilton Senior there. I thought that was absolutely touching to see that display.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he knows what it's like to he knows what it's like from his own son Lewis to be in that situation where you're coming up to your first Formula One Grand Prix, and you take a big hit to your confidence or something like that. Of course, Isaac Hadjar is famous for being an extremely emotional person. He wears his heart on his sleeve, and we all know that. And he was very, very visibly upset with himself. Easy mistake to make. Cold tires, damp track. He's a rookie. Off he goes into the wall. I once again have even less respect for Helmut Marko, who was not very understanding at all of the situation and basically called him a crybaby. And I think we can all now agree that Anthony Hamilton should be hired by Red Bull and they should sack Helmut Marko.
Isaac Hadjar, of course, spun out in a very wet Australian Grand Prix. And now I've gone to the Australian Grand Prix in the last couple of years. I didn't go this year, though, and to be honest with you, this was the first Australian Grand Prix I've watched and was glad I wasn't actually there, because the weather in Melbourne was absolutely terrible across the weekend. Bad enough to cancel one of the Formula 2 races. And I believe one of the
feature race, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, the feature race, and I believe Supercars on the Sunday was also cancelled as well. I'm actually not entirely sure. I haven't had a chance to watch those races. There's been quite a lot of racing this week, and we'll be talking about that as well. So very, very wet Australian Grand Prix, but probably one of the most exciting races we've had recently in Formula One, I think.
I reckon, and this is a slightly irrelevant statistic, but I think it was the first rain-affected season opener in Formula One since 2003. And even that wasn't properly rain-affected, so it's probably the first properly wet season opener since maybe, was it 1993 in South Africa? You don't normally get wet weather at the season opener, but yeah. Anyway, that's irrelevant. What a race it gave us, I tell you. It was, oh my goodness. From all of those little accidents, the safety car period, to that ridiculously close finish with Max and Lando. Honestly, what a cracker of a way to open the championship, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what else is going to happen in F1 this year. I'm a little concerned about the pace of the McLaren, especially in the dry. I've long said this, that there's no such thing as a boring Grand Prix, but Formula One fans tend to get a little bored if one team has a clear advantage. And I'm a bit worried that if McLaren do turn out to be the dominant car and start running away with it, then people are going to very quickly get disillusioned with Formula One. And I think that would be a mistake with the amount of classic racing we've seen recently, both last year and at the start of this year. So I'm hoping we get some more surprises, maybe some more rain in China, and see how it goes.
Yeah. So extremely, extremely tough conditions at Albert Park, which created quite a difficult race for a lot of the rookies. Of course, we mentioned Isaac Hadjar being one of those being caught out on the formation lap, spinning the tyres up, trying to get some temperature into them, only to fire himself off into the barrier. Such a terrible, terrible mistake, and one that he obviously felt very, very bad about.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but was that actually on the formation lap, or was
on the formation lap?
Yeah.
Or was it on the reconnaissance lap going to the grid?
No,
No,
it was the formation lap. In any case, though, it results in a DNS for Isaac Hadjar, did not start. Obviously not the only rookie to be caught out. Jack Doohan called out very early on as well. Shortly followed by someone who wasn't a rookie, Carlos Sainz Jr. Fernando Alonso was also caught out as well. Not technically a rookie, but often regarded as one. I'm pretty sure he's aging in reverse. And if you look at some of the other non-finishers as well, many of them were rookies. One of them, of course, one of the rookies actually was Kimi Antonelli, though, who didn't crash out and actually had a spectacular race to open up his Formula One career. And I believe that was actually the best Formula One debut since Kevin Magnussen finished second at the Australian Grand Prix 11 years ago.
It was a really good start for Andrea Kimi Antonelli, especially considering how low down on the grid he started. Remember, he actually started the race in 16th position, so fantastic for him to finish 4th. Initially had a really strange penalty for an unsafe release that nobody seemed to have seen, and that was later overturned on appeal, so I think they'll have to review exactly what caused that penalty and, you know, why it seems to be a complete phantom penalty. But anyway, but yeah, Andrea drove absolutely fantastically, and on a day where pretty much all of the other rookies spun off and crashed, it was fantastic.
I think also he had a spin as well.
He did. He got away with murder with that one. Like, so
wow.
I'm amazed that he did not crash that car. Somebody really wanted him to finish 4th in that race, because he got extremely, in a race where Isaac Hadjar, Jack Doohan, Carlos Sainz Jr., Fernando Alonso, Gabriel Bortolesso, and Liam Lawson, Bortolesso and Lawson also rookies as well, effectively. In a race where they were all caught out, we only had 14 finishers. Kimi Antonelli spinning and getting away with absolute murder on that one, basically. He was so lucky to keep that car out of the wall, though that maybe speaks to his talent, even though he is a rookie, and drove absolutely superbly to finish 4th at the end of the day.
For those people that are like saying that Jack Doohan has his Alpine career measured in days, first of all, never underestimate the evil that is Flavio Briatore. And secondly, because he's already made up his mind as to who actually wants that other seat. Like, you can lose it really badly at that particular spot where he crashed. I've seen over the years, like, I believe Rubens Barrichello's crashed there before, and...
yeah, Vettel, Kubica.
Yeah, like,
yeah.
It's a shame that it had to happen that way, and I really hope we see more of Jack Doohan, because... the kid's fast. It's just, I hope he gets the shot he deserves.
It was a really tough break for him. I think when he's already under the microscope about holding on to his career, he really could not have afforded a race like that. And unfortunately, he was caught out in the way that so many people were. Two drivers that were actually interestingly caught out as well were Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. So... the two McLarens they more or less controlled the race along with Max Verstappen until the rain finally hit, and the two drivers were caught at the two McLarens who were first and second at the time. They were effectively caught out at the same time, at the same corner on dry tires. Both cars went off the track. Lando Norris managed to gather it up again, but Oscar Piastri unfortunately slid off the track at the final corner. So basically slid off the track at one corner, couldn't gather it up for the next, and slid off at the second to last corner, allowing Max Verstappen to go through, leaving the Aussie stranded at his home Grand Prix, only to be saved by the tractor driving skills he learned at Diddley Squat Farm, saving himself from certain retirement and getting himself back in the race. It could have been a McLaren 1-2, although it wasn't in the end. Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, basically, it was down to those two to keep the race interesting right to the very end.
And interesting it was.
Yeah, a lot of people would have said that it should have been a McLaren 1-2. And to be honest, Piastri did nothing wrong there. No one really did anything wrong in that situation. They just hit a sudden puddle of water that they could not have predicted. And, great driving from Max Verstappen not to spin off as well. Great driving from Lando Norris to rejoin the circuit and not lose a place to Max Verstappen. Great driving from Oscar Piastri not to get beached. I think all three drivers drove very well in that situation. And, whatever happened is whatever was going to happen. But, I'm glad Oscar was able to continue in the race. Unfortunately, that was the moment that our race prediction went down the drain. Because if you remember in the last episode, all three of us predicted Oscar Piastri to win, and he ended up 9th. But through no fault of his own, really. I do want to quickly say, because we were talking about the rookies going off and crashing before. I'm not convinced that Gabriele Bortoletto's crash was driver error. As he's spinning, you can see the suspension break, and normally that doesn't happen from a spin. I reckon his suspension was already on its way out before he was spinning, and the spin just kind of finished it off. I don't think...
something clearly broke.
I think it was cause rather than effect, let's say that. But yeah, honestly, Bortoletto, what a wonderful job. Got through to Q2 in qualifying. Out-qualified Nico Hulkenberg, who ended up being my driver of the day, by the way. Both Sauber drivers, really, really good that weekend, and it's just a shame that they didn't both end up with points finishes.
So I think Bortoletto... so Bortoletto and Lawson more or less went out at the exact same time. So Lawson had basically an identical crash to Isaac Haujar, although he was driving the Red Bull as opposed to the V-Carb. That, of course, triggered the final safety car I believe it was the final safety car of the race, which treated us to a classic fight to the finish between Lando Norris and Max Verstappen. The history books will read Lando Norris started from pole and won from pole, although it certainly wasn't that simple because Max Verstappen kept him honest right until the very end and made for a very, very exciting show to finish off the Australian Grand Prix.
It was actually a grand slam from Lando Norris, pole position, fastest lap, and won the race. Not quite a grand slam because obviously Verstappen led some laps, but yeah, Lando was absolutely fantastic in the Grand Prix. It was a great, great drive. But we know how good Max Verstappen is in the wet, and he was right on his tail. To be honest, it makes Lando's drive better that he had to fend off Max Verstappen at the end. I am more impressed with him now than I would have been if he'd run away and won it by 15 seconds. So... we know that the McLaren has pace this year, especially in the dry. We know that Max Verstappen has absolutely not given up. He will win races this year. This is going to be a heck of a fight. So bring on China.
That leaves us with the end result of Lando Norris winning the race, Max Verstappen finishing in second, George Russell finishing third, Andrea Kimi Antonelli finishing in fourth, Alex Albon coming home in fifth place for an impressive result for Williams. Well done for him. We'll get to that later on in the show. Impressive result for Lance Stroll. Didn't think I'd say that. He comes home in sixth position for Aston Martin.
Even more impressive.
What's perhaps even more impressive, yes, Nico Hulkenberg finishing in seventh place for Sauber. Tough race for Ferrari. Charles Leclerc finished in eighth, ahead of Oscar Piastri in the other McLaren, sandwiched between the second Ferrari of Lewis Hamilton, rounding off the top 10. The last of the finishers, Pierre Gasly in 11th, Yuki Tsunoda in 12th, Esteban Ocon in 13th, and Ollie Behrman rounds off the finishers in 14th.
If only that safety car had occurred, or if only the rain had occurred and the safety car period occurred a few laps after that, Lewis we'd have a completely different top three, because it looked for a bit like it was going to be Hamilton, Tsunoda, and Lando. But
that's true, but it was never going to be the case.
Yeah.
I think Ferrari really, really dropped the ball by leaving the drivers out on slicks. I don't think it was ever going to dry up that quickly. I think even if, even if they had stayed out, they'd have been caught out on those slick tyres. They'd have dropped like a stone. So I think it was an absolute disaster for Ferrari to pit so much later for the Inters than everyone else. They were always going to drop to the back, and they're lucky to have come away with any points at all. So it was like a welcome to Ferrari moment for Lewis Hamilton, in all honesty. And of course, he had those arguments with his engineer over the K1 boost or whatever it was earlier in the race. You had the classic quote from Charles Leclerc's engineer about, yes,
Yes.
your car is filling up with water. That must be the water. This was a classic Ferrari weekend, I'm afraid to say. And yeah, they never change, do they?
The irony is that their World Endurance team is very well run and everything, and Ferrari's F1 team is just borderline incompetent.
Do you ever think AF Corsa look across the garage? I'm assuming there must be a garage at Fiorano where they're working on their car and they're watching what the main Scuderia is doing and wondering what's happening over there.
Yeah.
Oh, mate, they were watching from Sebring.
Oh, well, no. Well, yeah, well, some of them would have been at Sebring. We'll get to Sebring later, but of course, AF Corsa were at Sebring as well. We'll talk about that later. I will say actually about Ferrari, a lot of people are saying that, Lewis Hamilton's made the wrong choice and they're making judgment calls on Ferrari early on. I wouldn't, even though, so this, I believe, was the worst Ferrari debut since Luca Badoa in 2009, I seem to remember. It was some stat like that. I can't remember what it was.
Really?
Did anyone do worse? I think it was.
Ivan
I'd be
Capelli.
surprised about that. Well, that was
Ivan Capelli in 1992.
No, worst since Luca Badoa.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, in any case, regardless of that stat, I think this obviously tough weekend for Ferrari. I also do think that Lewis Hamilton is still sort of learning the car to a certain extent. They were caught out on the strategy, but I would still expect them to do quite well as the season progresses, and I'm sort of expecting them to sort of move up the grid as the current Scuderia Ferrari unit improves as a team.
I wouldn't judge them by this, honestly. No. Like, I wouldn't judge them like just by one race. Like,
and a lot of people are, unfortunately.
And look, he finished. He finished the Grand Prix. He showed signs of pace. He was actually pretty good in the Ferrari. It's just he's trying to like everyone's like I keep saying, it's only the first race. Get to round 6 before you pass judgment.
It's absolutely too early, but it's going to take a mammoth job to really ingratiate himself in the history books of the Tifosi. Because let's face it, Ferrari are very unlikely to win the championship this year. They may snag some races, may snag some race wins, but people expected Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari to win the championship. And I think anything less than that is a failure. So 10th place in his debut was very much it was what Lewis needed to show him the reality of the situation, that he's not just going to waltz in and win races from the off. And I think, it can't get much worse than that. So he's going to build it up from here.
Historically, people expected Michael Schumacher to win the World Championship on his debut in '96. It took him time. It took him all the way to 2000 to win the World Championship.
Tough race for Lewis Hamilton, as we said. Unfortunately, that has meant a shocker for the Triple Crown Racing F1 fantasy team. As for the opening race, I had Lewis Hamilton as my 2 times boosted driver, Carlos Sainz, Isaac Hadjar, Gabriel Bortoleto, Esteban Ocon as my drivers, McLaren as my first constructor, and Williams as my second constructor. So pretty terrible across the board, considering 3 of my 5 drivers did not finish. I
think your team picks were solid. Your drivers,
they were not. They were not. So yeah, tough break for me on that front. But I think that just about does it for the Australian Grand Prix review. I do actually want to segue into another related story. This year has sort of got me thinking about Williams' performance. Now, of course, Carlos Sainz had a tough race for the Australian Grand Prix. An accident at the final corner under the safety car in the opening laps. Unfortunately meant that he did not finish the race, but Alex Albon managed to finish in 5th position. Williams, of course, have been strong. They were, of course, strong in preseason testing, as we've discussed multiple times on this show as well, with Carlos Sainz Jr. being the fastest driver overall across preseason testing. And of course, they're also a team that has experienced a resurgence in the last couple of years. And that's gotten me thinking, and this is going to be a main discussion point for this particular episode. I can't help but draw parallels between Williams' resurgence and McLaren's resurgence. So I pose an interesting question. Is Williams the next McLaren that is being a team to experience a resurgence and fight back to the front? And I believe I can make a convincing argument that they can.
So Jack, by posing the question, is Williams the new McLaren, are you suggesting that in a few years' time they could be winning championships?
Yes.
Okay, that's bold. That's bold. I'm assuming that you have looked at the trends and said, well, Williams is a privateer team from the UK who have had a dip and are gradually working their way back up. McLaren was originally a privateer team from the UK. They've also just come out of a dip. They worked their way up and now they're at the front. I think there are some differences in the situation. McLaren are now a manufacturer team. They're still a engine customer. They're still a customer of Mercedes. But they also produce road cars. They have a lot more backing than Williams. And that doesn't mean so much in the modern day of cost caps and things like that, but it does still make a difference. What Williams have going for them is that obviously they are a team with a lot of heritage, a lot of history, so the best mechanics want to work for Williams, but they also want to work for McLaren. So, I personally think that Williams, I can't see them returning to their former glory. I'm sorry if that's pessimistic, just because I don't think they are big enough as a team. I don't think they've got the funding for it. I don't think they're spending up to the cost cap. And I think teams like McLaren were able to turn that around because they did have the facilities.
Well, I think it's partially because I'll go through my sort of main reasoning in a second. But first of all, you mentioned the cost cap, how it's not such a big deal these days. McLaren, yes, they do have effectively factory backing as a manufacturer of road cars. But there have been periods of time, even in sort of relatively recent time periods in modern Formula One, where Williams has, as a complete privateer, been able to outperform the factory backed McLarens. And I do think that as time goes on, Williams will be able to gain the financial resources. Anyway, let's sort of review here. So both teams were particularly strong in the 80s and 90s, and to a certain point, they were strong in the 2000s as well. McLaren, of course, won championships in the 2000s, and Williams were able to find some success as the BMW factory team as well. Both teams fell off in the mid part of the 2010s. McLaren had been falling off, but fell completely backwards in 2015 when the switch to Honda engines basically forced that team towards the back. It's not that the Honda engine was bad. I seem to remember it just not pairing particularly well with the McLaren package at the time.
It was good for GP2.
It was good for GP2, famously it was. People forget that Williams were reasonably competitive as late as 2014 and 2015. The 2014 Williams in particular, I think actually if it hadn't been for the standout performances of Daniel Ricciardo for Red Bull in 2014, Williams could well have been second in the Constructors' Championship to Mercedes. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I believe they were the only other car to get a pole position that year, other than the Mercedes. The Williams was probably faster than the Red Bull for most of the season, and probably more reliable too. It's just that obviously Bottas was quite inexperienced at the time. Massa was a little bit past his prime. And then in the Red Bulls, you had the extremely experienced Sebastian Vettel, who struggled at first but then got on top of it. But of course, the star Daniel Ricciardo, who was right at the start of his prime at the time. So yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. But then again, it's also an interesting case study where Williams were at their strongest when they were a factory team, like when they were the BMW factory team. This is their strongest of the 21st century. So I think the fact you brought that up, it kind of reinforces what I was saying before about how you sort of have to have that factory support to have the facilities to challenge for wins. But sorry, I'm going around in circles here, but yeah, you're absolutely right that there are a lot of parallels between the history of McLaren and the history of Williams, even their relatively recent histories.
Yeah. So 2014 was strong. 2015 was still relatively strong for Williams as well. However, they sort of began falling off in 2016, but were essentially completely at the back of the grid by 2018. You'll, of course, remember they came into 2018 with a car that didn't really work aerodynamically. You had Sergei Sorokin and I believe Lance Stroll at the helm of that car as well. So it was a car with sort of two inexperienced drivers behind the wheels of them, and it was just unfortunately a very, very bad year for Williams, finishing 10th with only 7 points at the end of the year. However, both teams they sort of began to be brought back towards the front by a sort of changing of the guard that happened more or less at the same time for both teams. Ron Dennis left McLaren, which paved the way for Zach Brown and eventually Andreas Seidel to join McLaren as well. And I would say that they've both had quite a profound impact at that team. And the departure of the Williams family, of course, the Williams family had a wonderful stewardship of that team. But Doralton Capital gave them a much needed financial boost, with James Vowles eventually becoming team principal. And I believe sort of both of these instances show that sometimes a change in culture and a sort of doing away of sort of processes that may or may not have become stagnant over the years, sometimes that's what a Formula One team needs to bring itself back to the front.
That is true, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Doralton Capital came into the Williams squad at the same time that Williams have had this resurgence. I'm very interested to see just how competitive that car is going to be this year, because there were times in that last race weekend where the Williams seemed to be on par with the likes of Ferrari, which is insane to say at this point in time. I think they're ahead of Alpine and Aston Martin, and they have an extremely strong driver lineup with Sainz and Albon as well. Definitely don't underestimate how much of a difference that makes. So yeah, I think that the changing of the guard that Doralton Capital coming in has triggered is one of the major influences for why Williams is on the up now. I just think they need a bit more to really contend and win championships.
This actually reminds me of how Williams was in a bit of a resurgence in 1989-1990, prior to hiring Nigel Mansell and Ricardo Patrese as their drivers. And they had they were basically developing with Renault.
They were in close sort of contact with Renault at that point.
Yeah, I don't think Williams is going to be the next McLaren, to be honest. They might win one or two races in the next couple of years, unless, of course, the 2026 regs come along and they somehow manage to shoot their way up the grid, like in 91. Like, their low point was sort of like when they lost Honda in 88. Like, one of their low points was, in this comparison, was when they lost Honda in 1988 and wound up going to a Judd-powered engine. Then they started to slowly creep up the grid. Then 1991 came along, and then 92, 93, all the way to 97.
I will say, it is a little bit worrying for Williams that they've become so competitive right now. The trouble for Williams here is they can't really stop developing their 2025 car to work on their 2026 car, because they might not get another chance to be this high up in the championship again for a good few years. So ideally, you'd want to hit the ground running for the new regulations, but Williams cannot waste this opportunity where they could be fifth. They could be fifth in the Constructors' Championship, I'm a little bit worried that they're going to have to put all of their eggs in one basket and that they might drop down again next season. But
I have a feeling. I have a feeling that James Vowles would sort of. I feel like he'd be smart enough to know that he can't pass up the opportunity of a regulation change to bring Williams back to the front. So I feel like James Vowles would be smart enough to know. Smart enough to allocate resources and basically say, right, this is the best that we're going to do in 2025, but we cannot compromise 2026 and the subsequent years, because if we sacrifice 2026, it's going to be years more pain until we can bring ourselves back towards the front again. So what I now that you mentioned that, what I can sort of see happening specifically this year is that Williams do well up to a point, and as the 2026 development starts, they start to move towards the back again, because logically that would make the most sense.
And
I just hope they don't sacrifice 2025, to be honest.
if they have the right car together with both Carlos and Alex, they could surprise a lot of people. They could possibly win a race or two.
They certainly could. And now that you mentioned that, actually, I have another quite interesting parallel between the two teams, between McLaren and Williams. They both hired Carlos Sainz Jr. During their resurgence to the front. So Carlos Sainz Jr. may be the exact man that you need to help bring teams back towards the front.
Don't count out Alex Albon either.
No, absolutely not.
He carried the Williams team on his back last couple of seasons, especially in 2024 when they were struggling to even keep the second driver. They were struggling to even keep the cars intact, let alone be in contention for points. The trajectory that Williams is looking at right now, even though it's only the first race of the year, I could see them being the best of the midfielders, or close to it.
So, you mentioned 2024, so Williams scored 17 points throughout the whole course of 2024, but with the Australian Grand Prix, with just Alex Albon's result at the opening race of the season, they have already scored 10 after only a single race, which I think is absolutely hugely, hugely impressive, and I think that speaks to their progress as a unit.
I think you're right to pose the question: are Williams the next McLaren? Because there are so many similarities that you can't deny it's an intriguing story, and history rhymes, so maybe.
That concludes Formula One for this week. Wonderful way to open up the Formula One season for 2025. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how the season progresses, both for the rest of the grid and for Williams as well.
But Jack,
yes.
Jack, weren't we going to make it a segment that we do
yes.
predictions? Yes. I want to hear who you've got for the Chinese Grand Prix.
Okay, this one's a slightly difficult one to call. I think that Max Verstappen is going to win.
Ooh.
And the reason I've said Max Verstappen, I mean, it is actually quite difficult to call this one, because we have reached effectively the end of the regulation cycle, with only having had one race at the Chinese Grand Prix, with our current set of regulations, which I think is quite interesting. But that Chinese Grand Prix was actually won by Max Verstappen. As for the rest of them, I think Lando Norris will finish second. I think he will continue his championship campaign. I think Piastri will be third. George Russell will be fourth. And let's go out on a limb. Let's say Charles Leclerc is going to be in 5th place. Although, judging by how most of our predictions over the course of this show, both in sports cars and basically every single category we've ever predicted, everything we predict will effectively be wrong. Do you know what? We've got a superpower. We can sway the course of championships. If it gets boring, say Lando Norris wins too many races, let's just say Lando Norris wins, and then he won't win because we're wrong every time.
It is basically just gambling. Motorsport is unpredictable, and that's why these predictions are fun, because we can look back on last week, all three of us saying Oscar Piastri, then we can look at the results, Piastri 9th, and be like, oh, okay. Anyway, Chris, do you have a top 5 prediction?
Gonna have to go. Is this a sprint weekend or no?
It is.
Oh.
Ew.
Okay, I'll just leave my Grand Prix results at that. I feel like we should leave sprints, possibly.
Yes, but don't worry, we don't have to predict the top 5 for a sprint as well.
It's okay. It's okay. I don't credit the sprint races anyway. I think it's going to be Lando, Piastri, Verstappen, Leclerc, and Hamilton.
That's interesting. Okay, so as always, I posted mine on Blue Sky. I'll do them in reverse order. 5th place, I've got Max Verstappen. I think that statistically, this is going to be a dry race, and I think the Red Bull is going to struggle in the dry. 4th place, I've got George Russell. He's been very, very solid so far. 3rd place, and this is going to surprise some people, I've got Lando Norris. Yes, I know he is the favourite to win. I don't know. I just don't feel a Lando win this weekend for some strange reason. Maybe it's because he messed up the start in the sprint last year. I don't really know, but there you go. Lando Norris 3rd. 2nd, I have Kimi Antonelli. I think Antonelli had such a strong start to his career in Australia that he is going to be hyped up. And you often see a really strong result early in a promising rookie's career. So, as much as I didn't really believe in Antonelli coming into this season, I think his drive at Australia was impressive enough that I have predicted his first podium for this weekend. And P1, I have gone for, once again, Oscar Piastri. It wasn't right last time, but maybe if I predict it again this time, it will come true. And that, of course, means that we have 3 different drivers predicted for the win here. Jack's gone for Max, Chris has gone for Lando, and I have gone for Oscar.
And Lance Stroll will win the race because of our horrendously bad luck.
I will say though, your strategy is I think I have a name for it.
Okay.
It's the Trivial Pursuit strategy.
What? Keep guessing one answer until it comes right.
But yes, where you say one particular answer and then you'll wind up with the correct question to match it.
I'm surprised you didn't say the Family Fortune strategy.
I was also going to reference that one.
Turkey.
Turkey.
For those of you who don't get that
got
reference,
21 points for that.
For those of you who don't get that reference, look up Family Fortune's Turkey. I'm sure it'll come up.
Turkey.
Right. I think we should move swiftly away from Turkey onto the Mobil 1 12 Hours of Sebring, which is a huge U-turn. But what a race it was. What a race it was. Second race of the IMSA season. And I only just finished watching it just before this podcast began because it was 12 hours and it took me quite some time to work through. And I actually knew some of the results going into watching that race, but I was still I was still thoroughly entertained over the course of that race. So we've come away from this one.
I will say, this is the bit where you stop hearing or seeing me for the next half an hour because I did not see Sebring. So, Jack and Chris, I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave this one to you.
Well, it certainly was an interesting one. The number 7 car came into this race off the back of the Rolex 24 at Daytona, looking for their second race win of the year and Porsche Penske's first victory at the 12 Hours of Sebring since 2008 with the DHL-sponsored RS Spider all those years ago. And they delivered once again with the number 7 car of Felipe Nasr, Lawrence Vantura, and Nick Tandy winning the Mobil 1 12 Hours of Sebring. claiming their second race victory of the year. Nick Tandy also, by doing so, not only claiming the sweep of the 24-hour races at the last IMSA installment, but at this IMSA installment was able to win the Endurance Racing Triple Crown, which should be mentioned given the name of the channel that this podcast episode is on. That, of course, consists of the Rolex 24 at Daytona, the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and the Mobil One 12 Hours of Sebring.
And also, it should be noted that the 7 team has actually now swept the 36 Hours of Florida, as it's known, because the 24 Hours of Daytona and the 12 Hours of Sebring, very few have actually swept the 36 Hours of Florida.
I think that's such an immense achievement for Porsche to start this year off. It was actually a 1-2 for Porsche Penske Motorsports at Sebring with the number 6 car of Matt Campbell, Kevin Estre, and Mathieu Jaminet finishing second ahead of the 93 Acura of Renger van der Zande, Nick Yellerly, and Alex Palou, IndyCar regular, joining that lineup for the endurance races. What an achievement for Porsche. I really don't think that outfit could have started the year in a more dominant and in a better fashion that they could have. I also think it deserves a shout out to Felipe Nasr. I was very impressed by his final stint in the race. He, of course, had the full course yellows, the full course yellow to deal with as well. He was in the car for the final stint of the race before a tire carcass ended up on the Ullman Straight, which brought out the full course yellow, and he was able to hold on to that win after having led the race for quite some time. He was, of course, then under pressure because of that safety car, but managed to hold on to the lead of the race until the very end. I think Porsche got the strategy right, where some people really didn't. I think Action Express didn't get it quite right. BMW didn't really get it quite right either. Just faultless for Porsche.
Well, in fairness, first of all, that final full course yellow was called way too late. It was like they waited to call the yellow way too late. It actually caught out a lot of the LMP2 cars, but we'll get to that class in a moment. Yeah, the BMWs had a penalty early on, and then a rather silly move by the Shank cars by the number 60 team to release the Acura right as the BMW was alongside of it, damaging its own steering arm. That was silly by them. And unfortunately, the 31 for the Cadillacs, they had a lot of problems in that final stint with bad track position, and they got caught out by that full course yellow as well.
You mentioned Cadillac there as well. One of the Cadillac, I think Action Express they of course had a better weekend than the other cars in the Cadillac stable. Unfortunately, Action Express were caught out really at the end of the race. They couldn't make the fuel number to get to the end, so they had to make. They came in much earlier than the rest of the GTP field, and they couldn't quite make the mileage to get to the end of the race. But spare a thought for Wayne Taylor Racing, who had an absolute shocker of a weekend in multiple classes. Brendan Hartley in the wall in the number 10 car. Problems for the other car as well. Didn't finish. Brendan Hartley was in the 40. He wasn't able to finish the race, unfortunately. What happened to what happened to the number 10 car?
Well, it all started when the 10 decided to just shove the 023 Triarci Ferrari off into the wall.
Yes, that was the penalty that they got. Yeah. I seem to remember.
Stop in 60 seconds. And Wayne Taylor, this is the thing. I'm gonna go on my soapbox here. Wayne Taylor, do not give him a microphone, because especially when he's angry, because he has the tendency to talk and to speak like a complete idiot and not let things go. He was prattling on during the final full course yellow in the 10th hour. He was prattling on about that penalty, against the 10, which happened in the first hour. Which happened in the first hour of the damn race. Shut him up.
Relatively speaking, the number 10 car didn't actually do that badly. So the number 10 car did finish in 7th place. The 40 car retired. This was, of course, the car. So Brendan Hartley had an accident at Sunset Bend that put him in the wall. I'm not sure if that eventually contributed to their retirement.
It did, yeah.
It did.
Unfortunately, they were never the same after the incident with that incident in Sunset.
So
but, yeah.
It was also a shocker for Wayne Taylor's other cars as well. So I believe it was a throttle issue for the number 45 Wayne Taylor Racing Lamborghini as well in the GTD class that also caused them a poor result as well. So yeah, terrible race weekend for Wayne Taylor. A bit of a better weekend. Best place of the Cadillacs after that manufacturer actually won so many races at Sebring in the last few years. So the 31 car was the best place of the Cadillacs in fourth position.
It's the last one left.
And Frederick Vesey. Yeah. So, but even then they were caught out by strategy as well. Didn't go quite so well for them.
And they actually dominated the middle stanza of the race. They were the car throughout the transition from day to night. They were there. It's just unfortunately they like I said that badly timed full course yellow, just when the number 80, because the tire that was that came off was from the Lone Star Mercedes number 80. Like the tire carcass was in the racing line on the Ullman Straight in a place where it's very poorly lit, and I don't understand why they didn't instantly throw the full course yellow for that when they would throw the full course yellow for the spin in turn 17 with the Aston Martin earlier on.
I was getting flashbacks to the Qatar Grand Prix last year in Formula One, actually, when they failed to call the safety car when that piece of debris ended up on the front straight. But
the ladder didn't need to be a caution. That spin did not need to be a full course yellow. They threw the yellow at the absolute wrong time. Poor officiating. Absolutely atrocious officiating.
Which is rare for IMSA, because I feel like they normally make relatively good officiating decisions, but that wasn't one of them, unfortunately.
In recent years they kind of haven't, but I digress.
Anyway, so that you are right though with Cadillac with the 31 car. They were very much in the fight. It was basically a fight between the two Penske Porsches and that Cadillac as well. Well, unfortunately, that didn't result in a podium for the 31 car. I will
say though the Acura it seems like at night, like later in the race, like toward the end, they always seem to find pace. We saw it at Daytona, where the Acura was just suddenly found the afterburners, and like they were basically nowhere in the first half, and then they just suddenly within the last couple of hours they're there. Like, and I'm glad they got a podium out of that. But then on to Long Beach. See how they do.
I want to round off. We'll have to rattle through the other categories after this because we are getting on a bit. I do want to talk about Aston Martin for a second there. Unfortunately, not the best result for the Aston Martin Valkyrie on their IMSA debut, but they did manage to get to the end while making some V12 noises all the way, which we absolutely loved. And what I actually realized, what that actually helped me to realize, is that GTP is effectively with most of the private, like the sort of boutique manufacturers now out of the running now. It has more or less become a question of who's got the most money and who's got the most data. They mentioned something very interesting in the broadcast where manufacturers like Porsche and Cadillac and some of the teams that have been around in the current top class of prototype racing for a few years now, they've got about 400,000. I can't remember whether it was miles or kilometers, either or. It's quite a big number, whereas the Aston Martin Valkyrie's only got about 20,000 kilometers or miles of running, which is quite a big difference regardless of the metric. And I think that every single car that we've got in the current roster has the potential to do really, really well. It's just an issue of who's got data, who's got money. And I think currently Aston Martin are lacking a little bit of data at the moment. And this is, I think, Lamborghini's problem as well. I think they're lacking data in the way that so many other teams are. And I think, honestly, you need 2 cars on any given grid. It doesn't matter whether it's the WEC or IMSA. You've just got to have 2 cars in the same series. You're going to generate a lot of data. I feel like the data that you get from the World Endurance Championship and the tracks they go to in that series is very different to what you get in IMSA. But either or, you just need more cars out there and you just need more cars recording data. Chris?
First of all, disagree with you on the disappointing result for Aston Martin. The fact that not only did they finish in the top 10, they finished in the top 10 overall in their first race.
No, yes, you are right. Yeah.
At one of the most difficult tracks in IMSA.
Yeah.
Because people think Daytona is. No. Aston, like, Sebring is far and away more difficult than Daytona or Long Beach or Detroit or what have you. The fact that they actually finished, and at times were actually not only on pace, but beating the leaders' lap times, proves that this was not only just a test session for them for the WEC program, but also they know what they're doing, because the Heart of Racing guys, they're running the team for both IMSA and WEC, and there's a little bit of crossover between those 2 programs. But the thing is, like, when you have like a big basically this was a big 12-hour test session, and they were taking it to some of the prototype, some of the other GTPs.
Yeah.
And they have the handicap of they don't have a hybrid system. They also didn't do that thing from the Italian job, which you're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off.
Call back from last week.
Yes. They were trouble-free for the entire race.
Yeah.
More or less. Like, they didn't lose very many laps. Like, they lost, like, 3 tops.
Yeah.
And
I should probably rephrase my point a little bit. To people looking at that result, looking at 8th, they might think, oh, it's 8th place. But for a car in its first race in North America, I think that's a very good. It's a good result. They finished 8th overall. They didn't spend really. I don't think they really spent any time behind the wall.
They didn't spend any time behind the wall.
Result. We'll round off GTP there. We are getting on now. We need to rattle off through the other classes. Moving on to LMP2 into Europol into Europol competition, they managed to claim the victory with the number 43 car. Impressive result for them. Unfortunately, a crowd strike by APR threw it away in the closing stage of the race, making contact with the AWA Corvette in Sunset Bend. They are, of course, followed by the number 8 Tower car. This was the one that got disqualified from Daytona, wasn't it?
It won on the road, but was disqualified for a plank infraction.
Yeah, unfortunately, so they had to give back their Rolexes this week, but maybe some consolation, picking up a Sebring podium with the number 11 car rounding off that particular podium.
And I will say, first of all, Tom Dillman's final stint was simply excellent, holding off Sebastian Bourdais and Mikkel Jensen and all the LMP2 cars. He did an excellent job in that final stint to hold them off. But I will say, the guy I'm really impressed from that driver lineup from this weekend, Bijoy Garg. This kid, he knows how to like run a prototype, and I think he's going to be a future factory driver, to be honest. Like he's got the right stuff, I'll tell you. I tell you, LMP2, cracker. Absolute cracking race.
Absolutely. We should talk about GTD Pro as well.
Yes,
fans of Rexy with dental care now applied. Won the 12 Hours of Sebring with the 77 car of Lauren Heinrich, Alessio Picariello, and Klaus Bachler. So now you'll notice, of course, this week, since the front bumper was ripped off at the Rolex 24, the dinosaur teeth have had braces applied, and I'm expecting another gold tooth for Rexy because of that victory at the 12 hour. Absolutely fantastic result. Strong showing from BMW. Paul Miller Racing, bit of a redemption arc after Daytona. Second and third with the 48 car ahead of the number 1 car, rounding off that particular podium as well. But yeah, absolutely spectacular performance and an absolute fan favorite performance as well from Rexy,
especially after what happened this week with the whole controversy about the trademarks thing, which actually, hot take, I thought was a joke. I thought it was actually kind of funny that they like did that thing about the livery is trademarked thing. I thought that was actually a joke with because someone had, for context, someone had posted their GR86, like their road car with a set of teeth running along the grill, which was honestly pretty handy. They were fans of AO. Well, the whole thing turned into a bit of a snowball, and then they wound up Pfaff Motorsports actually, and this was really classy by them. They paid for that fan to come to Sebring and and they also put plaid stripes on the car. They gave them some plaid stripes to put on the bodywork of the car, and I also resisted the urge to do this. Dental plan. Rexy needs braces. And also, it should be noted that the reason BMW that 48 car did so well at Sebring, 2 words. Dan Harper. That kid, that guy, honestly, I have an eye for talent a little bit. I have a little bit of an eye for talent. Like I said about Bijoy Garg, he's the right stuff. He'll be a factory. He'll be in a prototype at some point.
And on this week's episode of Chris Whitfield's Got Talent. Moving on to GTD Pro. Normal GTD. It was a fight to the finish between the number 12 Lexus and the number 57 Mercedes, but the 57 Mercedes of the Winward Mercedes managed to claim that victory of Indy Jonty, Philip Ellis, and Doncha, sorry. I can't ever quite get that right. That car finished ahead of the Vassar Sullivan Racing Lexus of Jack Hawksworth, Franti Montecalvo, and Parker Thompson, with the number 27 Aston Martin, the Heart of Racing Aston, finishing in third position in class with Tom Gamble, Zachary Robichon, and Casper Stevenson. That was an interesting finish between the 57 and the number 12. Do you have any thoughts on the bump and run, Chris?
Guys, professional sports car racers should not be doing NASCAR things. It was mostly caused by the Corvette that was ahead of them. Because I saw I reviewed it afterwards, so I didn't have so much of a hot take, but it's fair that they didn't have any further action on it. To be honest, I think it's completely fair. Unfortunately, it looked not very copacetic, considering he just sent it up the inside. But I say fair move. But hey, good result for them, and a good result for Winward. And yeah, it was a really good race in GTD. Actually, good racing in the GTD, all the classes, to be honest. It's like your eyes need like 6 screens back and forth so you can see everything that's going on. It's like
unbelievable.
Basically, it's like, where do you look now? Something's happened here, and my things fell off. And but you get my drift. Like, it's like, yes. Where the hell do I look now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that should round off our Sebring 12 hours results. We're off to Long Beach next for the IMSA Weathertech Sportscar Championship. Very much looking forward to that. Caitlin Penny, your services may be required because it's now time for what?
Oh my goodness, I'm still awake. Wow. It is time for miscellaneous stories and points that we missed and therefore recovering now. TM. Bing!
Bing. Yes.
And we transition swiftly into the NASCAR race that happened in Las Vegas.
Yes, indeed. And it is Josh Berry that took his first career Cup Series victory in the Pennzoil 400 at Las Vegas, marking the first non-super speedway win for the Wood brothers since the 2017 June race at Pocono, and the 101st overall for the famous Wood brothers team. And I have to say, popular victory for them. Like it, I watched that race, and I have to say, like, very, very popular victory for Josh. And when you have someone like Mark Martin telling you that, like, you're an old school racer, the man builds his own race cars. He like maintains them. He reminds me a lot of Mark Martin.
Yeah.
Back in his Roush days.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
To be honest, I didn't see the race either, but I am happy for Josh Berry. And to be honest, I'm surprised it didn't come at a shorter circuit. I was expecting it to come at somewhere like Martinsville or something. Because, yeah, his win has been long overdue, but I think he's a short racer at heart, isn't he? He's done short oval racing and all kinds of things like that.
He is a former champion of the Cars Tour.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's also he's one of Dale Jr.'s prospects as well. We need more guys like him, because an old school racer, and that's the highest compliment you can give someone, a racer.
Absolutely. We'll move on to some sports cars because the FIA and the ACO have released a document regarding the LMP2 power plant. What can you tell us about this?
Correct. It'll be they have released a tender regarding the powertrain supply for 2028 through to the end of 2032. This is the specifications defined. A turbocharged engine weighing no more than 160 kilograms. A dry sump with direct fuel injection is preferred. A power output of 420 kilowatts or 563 horsepower. Adjustable to 380 kilowatts, 509 horsepower. With exhaust fitted, sound levels must not exceed 100 decibels. The gearbox must be a 6-speed sequential with mechanical limited slip diff. It must also have a service life greater than 14,000 kilometers before servicing. Yeah. And the cost of one engine, including ECU, must not exceed 1,750 euros per running hour, all exclusive. And this is from Daily Sports Car. And the transmission should not exceed 550 euros, excluding VAT, per running hour, all inclusive.
Wait, 550 euros for the transmission, and how much for the engine?
1,750 per running hour.
1,750 euros. Oh, per running hour.
Per running hour.
Oh, okay. So the Miata owners, you won't be able to put this engine in your car.
No, unfortunately not.
Expensive. Have they said anything about cylinder count or displacement?
They do not.
Okay.
I'm not sure who's going to be getting the contract. I would have to think that Gibson's going to probably make a bid. I believe it is actually a single source tender.
So, and it's also a turbocharged. So was that twin turbos or was it one turbo?
One turbo.
One turbo. So they're moving away from natural aspiration. Fair enough. Okay. That sounds interesting. I'll be interested to see who picks up. I think Gibson have done such a fantastic job. That Gibson V8 is utterly bulletproof. Like, when do you ever see one of those engines break? You just don't. They're amazing. We have some more sports car news. Who's joining Tommy Milner at DXDT for Long Beach? I'm assuming
Robert Wickens. You mean Robert Wickens is
Robert Wickens?
No, you mean Tommy Milner's joining Robert Wickens?
Oh, my apologies. Wait, hang on. Is this isn't in the mainline series, is it? Is this in Pilot Challenge?
Okay, so no, this is the main. The reason is DXDT Racing, because the race at Long Beach is GTP and GTD, not
He's
GTD Pro.
Wow.
He's available. Yes. He'll be driving the number 36 with Robert Wickens at
That's
the
awesome.
Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach. His IMSA debut, in fact.
That is awesome. I love to hear that Robert Wickens, and I love to see Robert Wickens in a top line series again. Absolutely welcome back, Robert Wickens. What an absolute legend. What a road it's been to get here. Love it.
Absolutely. And it'll be the it'll basically be a kind of debut for his new hand controls, which are designed by Bosch.
Bosch.
But yeah, honestly, like, the pride of Guelph, Ontario is back in a competitive GT car, and which is something that I think this lineup here, this is what they refer to as a stacked lineup. Plus, people forget, he's also won a championship in Pilot Challenge, so he knows how to get it done, and he also has experience at Long Beach.
That's not the only piece of exciting IMSA news that's come out this week. Calendar has been released, as mentioned. Mentioned in our show notes. What track has an enduro round returning to it, Chris?
Well, for fans of the old Generac 500 at Road America, the old endurance race they used to have there, get ready for a 6-hour race at Road America as part of the Michelin Endurance Cup, as the Indianapolis Battle of the Bricks and Road America have switched their race lengths for 2026. They will be basically going from Indy being a 6-hour race to now being a 2-hour and 40-minute event, and Road America is reversed. So Road America will be the 6-hour and part of the MEC, and Indianapolis will be the sort of regular length, the standard length race of 2 hours, 40 minutes.
I think that's a good idea, to be honest. I think IMSA having a premiere event at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, it's never going to stack up to something like the Indy 500. I think, honestly, Road America is the right track for this, and I think Indianapolis would probably lend itself better to a sprint event anyway.
And like, Road America, honestly, is one of the, like, it produces nothing but bangers, and
absolutely, yeah.
Also, it should be noted, the Pilot Challenge has also been named as well for their schedule, and it will also include their own 4-hour endurance race with Mid-Ohio returning as their kind of standalone race.
Yeah, wow.
2026.
All right, Caitlin, wrap us up with GPVWC.
Yeah, I have to get my my weekly mention of GPWC into this episode. GPWC, of course, for those who don't know, the premier category of R-Factor 2 sim racing, in my personal opinion, and not only because it is the main series that I commentate. I've been so excited for this season, and we finally got the first round at Albert Park, and it was very much picked up how last season ended. So Jan Grankvist won the race. He, of course, is the reigning champion, who we're very lucky to still have on the grid, because, of course, we've had a little bit of a trend of champions not really sticking around, so long may that continue. But yeah, he won the race, followed by last season's runner-up Tom Stevens. There was a surprise pole position for rookie Alessandro Maggio, but he had an outstanding penalty from a race that he did last season, and so ended up starting a bit further down in the race, and unfortunately ended up crashing out by himself. But yeah, relatively exciting race. I think it came down to about 4 seconds in the end, maybe 4.5 seconds. And the next one, we're going slightly away from the Formula One calendar to bring back the Turkish Grand Prix. So definitely make sure to look forward to look out for that one on the GP4WC Sim Racing YouTube channel. So yeah, there's my weekly GP4WC update out of the way.
We'll move on to some listener comments now. We only had one, and that is, of course, from the most regular contributor to our comment section for this show, and that is Robin Tails Fighter, who said on the last episode, this was our Le Mans entry list and F1 predictions episode. He said, I really like the new intro thing with the funny clips at the start of the show. So in the last couple of episodes on the YouTube version, specifically, we've had a special intro for those 2 episodes, and that's going to be a regular thing on the YouTube ones, not for the Spotify one, just for the YouTube ones. Main reason for that is because I don't know what the exact rights are about me using the YouTube library on other platforms, so I don't really want to risk it with that. So that's just on the YouTube version. At 9 minutes 20 in the previous episode, he said, fun fact, the reason Wayne Taylor Racing switched to Acura in the DPI era was because they thought they'd have a bigger chance of going to Le Mans with them. How the tables have turned. At 28 minutes, he gives us a correction. Thank you very much, Robin Tails Fighter, for holding us accountable as often as you do. He said the Genesis will be running their own factory team in the WEC. IDEC is helping them getting ACO experience, but won't be responsible for running the car. He also says, also the 63 Mercedes, I'm pretty sure it is using the same number because the team won ELMS with a car using number 63 because they were using a Lamborghini. So 63, obviously a very common number used for Lamborghini sports car racing. That trend continuing over to the Iron Lynx Mercedes Le Mans effort. And that just about does it for this episode of the Motorsport Recently Show. There probably won't be an episode next week because we're going to be moving to a bi-weekly format, unless, of course, there is the necessity for an emergency podcast episode. You never know. Between now and the next episode, I will be racing at the second race of the season in SEK. That's, of course, the karting championship that I race in. We're moving on to Orange. We opened up the season in Canberra with a podium. Let's hope we can pick up another one of those. And let's hope I don't repeat what I did last year at Orange, which was more akin to what Vitaly Petrov did at Malaysia in 2011. I'd like to not do that again. But aside from that, my name has been Jack McKenzie, and joining me on the microphone, as usual, has been the wonderful Chris Whitfield and Caitlin Penny commentary. Leave your comments, leave your likes on both platforms. We could use some reviews on the Spotify. Give us a 5-star review if you please. And that just about does it from me. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.
Ta-ta.
Ta-ra.